What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Going Through the Gospels. I'm Freddie, and welcome to episode 3. We are going through Matthew 2, verses 1 through 12. And guys, before we dive into the passage, our purpose for going through the Gospels and breaking it down section by section is to learn more about Jesus so that we can fall deeper in love with him. So guys, for sake of time, we're going to take it in chunks, and let's get into the passage. So this is the visit of the wise men. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. Okay, so we see a couple things in the beginning of this passage. Now after Christ was born, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea. Wait, so Christ was just born? Wait. Wait, it seems as though it was just an afterthought. It seems as though they kind of just pushed through it, or at least Matthew did. We learn more about it in Luke about the reaction of the angels and the shepherds, but in Matthew we don't get a lot of information. Bethlehem gets low key lit when Jesus comes, but it seems as though in the rest of Israel there wasn't much of a response to Jesus' birth. And it's interesting because Jesus was the long-expected Messiah, and you would think that there would be more of a celebration. But there's not. Jesus was kicked out of the inn because there was no room. He was born in a stable to very poor parents, away from home. His birth as the king of not only the nation of Israel, but everything was so small. His welcome into this world just speaks to the humble nature of Christ coming as a servant. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, but it's also really weird. I don't know. To me, it's weird, but if the king of all things that has come into the world, you would think that there would be more of a response, but there's not. But let's keep moving. It says in the day of Herod the king. So Herod the king was an appointed king by the Romans, and he had been reigning for about 35 years when Christ came. And so it says that men from the east came to Jerusalem. And so these men, we know them as the three wise men, and otherwise known as the Magi. And so people think, Magi, magician, sorcery, not stuff that we typically associate with Christianity. Here's 3 things that we know for certain about the Magi. 1, they were Gentiles. They were not part of the nation of Israel. Number 2, they were scholars. They knew the stars. They studied the stars. And 3, they were from the east. That's what we know. That's what we know. And so it's interesting how these 3 Gentile men who study the stars would recognize an extraordinary star in the sky and attribute it to the coming of the Christ child. It doesn't make sense how Gentiles would make that connection. But it's cool that God used something that the Gentiles studied to point them to his son Jesus. I mean, he used angels in Bethlehem for his people. They would recognize that. But Gentiles would recognize the stars. They studied the stars. And so God was faithful in his use of a star to proclaim his son's coming. Not just that the heavens declare the glory of God, but also it's a sign to those who wouldn't have recognized another sign. It's an incredible act of grace that God brings the Gentiles in to his son's coming. I think it's really cool. So they come and they come to Jerusalem because Jerusalem, they figure it's in the land of Judea. People from Jerusalem should probably know where this kid is, right? Well, when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him. And they assembled the chief priests and scribes of the people, and he inquired of them, "Where is the Christ to be born?" Stop there. They don't know what's going on. They have no idea what's happening with this Christ child. Where is he been born, King of the Jews? For we saw the star when it rose and have come to worship him. They're like, oh, that's today? The Jewish people didn't know. They didn't recognize this. And you would think that their response would be joy and celebration in the announcement that the Messiah that they had been waiting for has come. But they're troubled. They don't know what to think. And so Herod, we see a couple responses. He brings people in to tell him, first of all, where the child's to be born. And they say in Bethlehem of Judea. So it's written by the prophet, "You, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." So they're troubled. And why is Herod troubled? He's had his kingdom for 35 years. There's not much more he can do as king in his lifetime. And yet he's troubled. Because he values his kingdom more than he values the coming of this Messiah. And it blows my mind. And so we see Herod being a little sneaky snake. He summons the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child. When you found him, bring me word that I may come and worship him also." Listen, if you have to bring people into a room privately just to tell them that you want to come worship the child, that is, well, it's shady. But it also speaks to the fact that Herod didn't want anybody else to know his motives. That's significant. That's not really a kingly, how you think a king would act. But he did. But his jealousy and his worry made him act very foolishly. There are so many things he could have done if he was really worried about, about the Christ child. He could have sent spies. He could have sent people with the Magi to find out where Christ was. But no, he trusts 3 men that he has never met before to go and find this, the Christ child, and then come back and just tell him where it is. So it was foolish, but it was really by the grace of God that he was bonded from that. So let's keep moving on. After listening to the king, they went on their way. Who went on their way? The Magi. You know what's interesting? No one else is listed as going on their way. The Jews just found out that the Messiah has come and that he's in Bethlehem right now. And nobody moves. Nobody lifts a finger. In fact, people are troubled about it. And it's incredible how the people who were closest to God, the people who were God's chosen people, they were the furthest from God at that moment in time. They heard about God working. They heard about God moving at that time, and they didn't respond. That's the thing that I noticed about this passage is there's God saying time and time again, "Hey, my son has come, and nobody moves except for these Gentile men who God is leading with a star. It says, "Behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was." This star was moving ahead of them, and then it stops. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. Their journey was almost over. This king that they had traveled hundreds of miles to see was finally going to be in front of them. And going to the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. And what did they do? We hear about the story of the 3 kings laying down their gifts. But the first thing that these Gentile men did is they presented themselves in worship to Jesus. They fell down and they worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures. They offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And these are ceremonial gifts, but they were also practical because they were going to help Joseph and Mary raise their son. And so the last thing that we see, that these Gentile men were warned in a dream not to return to Herod. They departed to their own country by another way. And so these Gentile men were again directed by God to avoid Herod and to go home another way. And just as they were faithful in following the sign, the star that God had placed before them, they were faithful in following God's instruction on their way home. And this passage is just so good. And I hope I put enough sustenance into it, because I'm trying to cut down on time. But we learned a couple things. I'm going to try to wrap it up with this. God can use anybody for his purpose who is willing to follow him. Even people outside of the nation of Israel. If God called the Magi, and the Magi followed, and God used them for a glorious purpose to bring honor and to worship his son, and to also to bring gifts to help his mother and father. And then he used them to protect his son by going a different way home. And the Magi, if they would have not followed, would not have done any of these things. They would have put Christ in danger. And by following God, God was able to use them for his purpose. God directed the path of those that he chose. He used the star to direct these Magi to his son, which is crazy. And then faithfulness to God is the greatest journey you could ever embark on. These wise men were faithful in following where God was leading them. And that's all that they worried about. They were going to go and find the child that God had just placed on this earth. The sign, the heavenly sign that they had seen. They were going to find out where it was and worship him. And the very last thing I'm going to say is this passage sticks out to me a lot because it shows just how familiarity can be a dangerous thing, especially as a Christian. The more that you're in the church, the longer that you study the Bible, you can become familiar with it. And we see that the nation of Israel, they had been preached that the Christ was coming, the Messiah is coming again and again and again. And when they hear it, they don't react. They don't do anything. And it could be the same with us as Christians. We often, the people that are closest to God can oftentimes be the people that are farthest from God, because that fire, that light, it's not as strong. It's not burning as bright because they're just used to it. The story loses part of its meaning over time. And so it's so important to always be rekindling your love for God, and just diving deeper and deeper into knowledge and understanding and appreciation of the God that we serve. So guys, that being said, thank you so much for watching. This is the visit of the wise men. Be sure to check out the Men of Means, Men of Means with a Z, on Instagram, Twitter, Men of Means Podcast on Facebook, and you can check out the podcast episodes on iTunes and SoundCloud. But guys, thank you for watching. We love you, and we will talk to you later.